This is the best moments of the BBQ Central Show in 10 minutes or less. Ever wish you could re-listen to your favorite interview or segment? Do you enjoy hearing older shows for the first time in years? Then the best moments of the BBQ Central Show in 10 minutes or less is just what you need. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the best moments of the BBQ Central Show in 10 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Solberg. Today's episode is pulled from October 15, 2013. Ronnie Lotz, owner and proprietor of Cigars and Stripes Barbecue in Chicago, Illinois. He stops in, but first, let's get to Greg's visit with the one, the only, Mr. Teddy Reeder.
What grill or cooker should I buy, or perhaps how should I go about buying my next cooker or grill? What advice do you give people in general when they ask you that question?
Well, I give them a couple different scenarios, and it applies really for whether it's going to be a grill or you're going to buy a smoker. And I look at it this way: first off, determine how hard do you want to work. Because there's the easy way, and there's the middle of the road, and then there's the really hard way, which is usually the old school way, where you're dealing with burning logs down to coals and going old school. And so first off, you determine how hard do you want to work. Once you've got that determined, you then set your budget. And sometimes even your budget is important to know right off the top. But how much are you willing to spend? I often am at, someone says to me, well, I only want to spend $300 on a gas grill. And I'm like, well, you're not going to get a very good gas grill for $300. You'll get a gas grill. It's just not going to last as long as you'd like. And so, first is, after that is once you get your budget, the next is, then you got to go and start doing the research. And once you start researching, then you can determine what kind of grill or smoker you want to be. And it'll vary. And some people will say, oh, my neighbor has a big green egg. I want a big green egg. They'll be very happy, I think, with it. I don't know anybody in the world that's ever not had a big green egg and not been happy. And I think the only time they're not happy is when it's not running. And they're like, oh, my God, I really should fire something up in that thing, because it makes tasty food. But you determine. So figure out your budget, figure out how hard you want to work, then do some research, and you're set to go. But I often get questions are, what kind of grill should I buy? And like I'm a mind reader, I don't know. You got to give me some details of what you're willing to spend, and I can kind of point you in the right direction. But just make it tasty is the most important part. You want something that's going to give you good food. Yep,
make it tasty. Is that a trademark line? If I said that, would I have to pay you a commission for saying make it tasty?
Oh, God, no. No. You can make it tasty, anybody. Just go out there and make it tasty. No, I'm the easiest going guy. I like my beers cold, my bourbon smooth, and I like to keep my grills hot and my smokers at an even low and slow. And that's it. Other than that, I'm just a regular guy that just spends his days in his backyard barbecuing. And that's what I do. But for me, it's just about having some fun and making tasty food. And, whether it be just tasty, or if it's got some tasty goodness going to it, or it's got that extra special tasty going to it, just make it tasty.
So we're firmly into fall now, Teddy, and winter fast approaching, whether we like it or not. Are there certain recipes or even dishes that you tend to go to at this time of the year that maybe you don't get to any other point?
Oh, for sure. Number one, marrow bones. I love smoking and roasting marrow bones on the grills. And at this time of year, it's extremely rich, but it's a cold weather dish.
All right, Lon, look, I have to stop here for a second, because there's probably a good portion of the audience that is, maybe novice at best when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So when you hear marrow bones, people are probably like, well, I don't know what that is. Where would I get one? How do I cook it? I mean, you're going to have to break that down for us just a little bit.
Well, it's the shank, and traditionally the hind shank. And what I like to do from veal or beef cattle And I like to have those shanks cut up the middle lengthwise. A lot of people just cut them across into about a 2-inch thick bone, and then you roast them. And that marrow on the inside of the bone, it heats up, and there's a lot of fat in it. But I'm telling you, when that's spread on some fresh bread, little salt and pepper, and maybe a little bit of drizzling of some rosemary, man, it's tasty, tasty stuff. And just if you want to find it, go to your butcher and say, hey, I want some marrow bones. And can you split them in the middle lengthways for me? And go to town and have a good time with it.
What? So how long? How long does it take? Does it does it matter on how big the bones are? Do you need to cook it like at a 300-degree temperature on the grill? Is it an oven thing? I mean,
well, I've done it. You can roast them in the oven at 425 degrees. You can put them on your grill direct or indirect at about medium to medium high heat. And because you want to really get the fat that's in that marrow to render. And then you're just left with the succulent marrow on the inside after the fat renders off of it. It's mostly fat. The other aspect to that is you can smoke them, and I've smoked them usually at around 235 degrees. They take sometimes 2 to 3 hours to really get them to be that tender and rendered deliciousness. But if you want to do it hot and fast, just throw them on your grill, and you won't be disappointed. I've also planked them before, and that's a great way to add some very quick hot smoke to it.
All right, Ted, so I'm sure you're aware, being a food guy, that it is, well, maybe it's not up there, but here in the States, it's National Apple Month.
Cool.
Are you into grilling or smoke roasting apple dishes? And if so, maybe some tips on which ones to choose, how to prep, and perhaps even what to cook with them.
Well, I find there's certain apples that you should cook with, and there's some apples that you should just eat raw. Like a Granny Smith is a delicious apple eating on its own, just raw. A Pink Lady, which is kind of a yellowish apple with a pink hue, and when you bite into the flesh, it's very hard and tart and sweet all at the same time. That apple is much better when it's eaten raw. Same with a Gala. But when you get into cooking, a Fuji is really nice to cook. I like to cook with that. But a Spy or a Mac is a wonderful dish. And you can do baked apples on the grill. You can make an apple pie on the grill, or I make these boxes out of wood, out of maple or out of apple wood, and then I make a pie in there, and you bake an apple pie on your grill. And so you can have a lot of fun with apples. I love them. I love them in salads. I like them grilled straight up, cut in rounds. I like to dry them. And then use even smoked apples is great to use into making a smoky applesauce as a base for a barbecue sauce.
I was on your Facebook page the other day, and I saw a post that you made about stone grilling. So we got to talk about this before I let you go tonight.
Yeah, the stones are what I'm using is a product that's hand carved here in Canada. It's 100% Canadian soapstone, and it comes from my friends Maxine and Rich over at a company called BrazilianIce.com. And they've created these grilling stones. And you can also pop this stone in your freezer and get it nice and cold and serve sushi and smoked salmon on it. Mm-hmm. But it's what I find is great, especially in the winter time when the temperatures are getting pretty cold and nippy up here. It holds the heat. So you put them on your gas grill or you put them on your charcoal grill, and it's going to take that and absorb that heat. When you open your grill lid in the middle of the winter time, all that beautiful hot air rushes out.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing, once it leaves, it takes a long time to get hot again. But with the stone, once it absorbs that heat, it pretty much stays pretty darn hot. And I find just doing smash burgers on there are just incredible. Or while I'm grilling a steak, I may want to saute some onions or mushrooms. Or in the morning, maybe I'm grilling some bacon steaks up and I want to fry an egg or make pancakes. So it allows you, it's a wonderful accessory to your grill to allow you to fry on the grill, but on something that's going to absorb a little bit of that smoky flavor and give you a nice even heat, and it doesn't warp or bend, where metal tends to warp and bend.
Yeah.
And really metal is so impersonal. But, a hand-carved piece of stone is a wonderful thing. And it works. I don't know if you've ever cooked with salt stones either, salt blocks.
Never.
And salt block cooking is wonderful, only that it's extremely salty. So you've got to get used to that saltiness that comes from it. But you can buy, I think, a pink Himalayan salt block for around, in Canada, I think I've seen them around the $35 mark. And it's basically 8 to 10 inches wide, about 2 inches thick. And you just put that on your grill, and it heats up, and you can do like scallops or any of your fish dishes, and cook on the stone, the hot salt stone. And the grilling stones, the soap stones from Brazilian ice, They work the same principle, only they don't impart all that salt. And so if you're watching your sodium intake, the Brazilian ice stones are really great for that.
Absolutely.
And you don't need a lot of fat. You don't need a lot of oil. Once they're seasoned, like I used mine tonight. So I did some pork tenderloin and sautéed some onions with some red jalapenos. And I added all of maybe a teaspoon of oil to it just to slick up the stone a bit. And it was beautiful, even, consistent cooking. I love it. It's a great accessory. One of my favorite ones for this year.
To put in your request for a future show, please contact Jon Solberg via email at jon@thebbqcentralshow.com.
Let's go ahead and race to the hotline and welcome first timer to the show, Ronnie Lott joining me. Ronnie, how are you, bud?
Oh my God, this is incredible. I don't even know where I'm at. I feel like I can do this with my lawyer now. No, do you realize that I put cologne on for this interview?
Luckily, we have smell-o-vision tonight. Ronnie, no offense. You better put some more cologne on, buddy. Whoa.
Hey, listen, my first question to you is, what are you drinking, pal? What's going on with you?
I'm just drinking Pepsi.
This is incredible. Gene, I'm going to tell you this right now, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I've tagged you on the phone, and I know I probably made you nervous with my ranting on my text, but I want to tell you this, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. You, sir, are an incredible, what do you call yourself? Broadcaster? Do you call yourself like a DJ, the podcast game? You are a pleasure to listen to, because I'm going to tell you, and I mean this. You listen to that one guy with the big trailer, with the nice teeth, the rich guy from Texas, he feeds all the people. I think in my head that I want to hear the question, and then all of a sudden it's like you go in my brain and then you like ask the question. I'm like, my God, you're on the fucking ball, man. And this is a pleasure, and I'm totally stoked to be here. So what's on your mind, Mr.
Man, Ronnie, you're going to be my personal hype man from now on. You're coming on tour with me. All right, so now just to be clear, and for the people that are watching on video, I think they can make up their minds for themselves. You're not the Hall of Fame safety that used to blow up wide receivers back in the 80s and early 90s, correct?
No, in fact, there's a misconception. He was supposed to be on Married with Children. They originally called me, but I wasn't like a 10-foot black guy that could, run through a side of a Volkswagen. I was just, it was pretty funny. The producers called me like, Ronnie Lott. I'm like, you fucking A. But guess what? It was the wrong one. It was the wrong guy. Whatever. Hey, it's true. What do you want me to tell you?
All right. So prior getting into the restaurant world, you did some. For the people who don't know, you did some pro wrestling stuff. Can you kind of take me back maybe to a different time and obviously industry, and give us a little behind the scenes look at what life was like in that type of a deal?
Gene, it's weird, but you kind of you half blanked out. I got a little bit of it, and then all of a sudden it just went nowhere.
I was just asking about how you, in a previous life, you were doing some work in the professional wrestling scene. So if you could kind of take us back and, tell us what that life was like.
Yeah, all right. It's not a good thing to be involved in, because it's not going to do. Look, Gene, that was a really bad time in my life. It was great. I am very grateful to spend the time on the Southern pro wrestling circuit with wrestlers and whatever it is. If it was not for that, I probably would not be barbecuing today. So for whatever it's worth, it was like my big introduction. Here in Chicago, I'm an authority on the Chicago Italian beef. And that's what I like about your show, because everyone talks about, they always say low and slow and low and slow and whatever they talk about. But Chicago is clearly, and I mean this, we're the home of the low and slow. like a wood-fired Italian beef. We do that here. They took a really terrible cut of meat and roasted it really slow. The rib tip, which I feature here, is also another cut of meat that needs to be low and slow. Well, you know what? I always hate when people say that term, but man, I got to tell you something. You were talking to like the king, not the king, not me, but I mean, Chicago is just, all the good food has got to be barbecued just low. I don't know what to tell you, Gene.
We're talking with Ronnie Lotz. He's the guy that owns Cigars and Stripes Barbecue Lounge. If you want to check it out while we're talking, visit the website cigarsandstripes, all spelled out.com. So, Ronnie, where does the passion or the love of barbecue come from? Something that you kind of grew up around as a kid, or something that you just got into later in life then?
Well, it was interesting you brought up the wrestling thing. What used to happen is we do a professional wrestling circuit, and that was the mouthpiece for these professional wrestlers. Long story short, Monday night, Mid-South Coliseum, we would be there. Tuesday night, Louisville Gardens. Wednesday, Evansville, Indiana. Then we go to Blue Mountain, Mississippi, up on like a Thursday. We go to somewhere in Arkansas, and we did this circle, and it never ended, and it never ended, and it never ended. However, the guys that I lived with were called the Moondogs, and one of their sons, a kid named Jamie, his big thing was like, hey, man, I killed it. And I'm like, all right, well, then I'll cook it. And then it's like, well, I don't know, man. Look, we would build, my introduction to this whole thing was I would take cinder blocks and they're chain link fence, and then we'd just take these chickens and I'd cut them in half, and they'd call up all these drunken wrestlers, and then we'd barbecue. And they make me do it because I was the little guy. Listen, I'm not a big guy. I'm small. I mean, I'm the manager here. So they make me cook for them. And then all of a sudden, I got to tell you something. I could take a chicken for real and make it taste good. And it worked out quite well. One of my passions was Italian giardiniera. In Chicago, that's a condiment here that you can only get. My sister owns this beef stand in California called Taste Chicago. And they have a Chicago Italian beef. That's a trademark here. And in fact, on these TV shows, they always talk about, the beef, Al's versus Mr. Beef or whatever. Anyway, born and raised on it, that the condiment of giardiniera, which means garden mix, you can't get anywhere in this country except for here. My sister has to have it drawn out in pallets. So I always had a passion for hot sauce and hot foods. In fact, I got a hot sauce right here.
Boom, there it is.
Oh, listen, any of your listeners call up, I'm in. I'll feed you as many bottles as they call up. You can give them away all you want. This is Ronnie Lotz's Route 666. I'll make a long story short.
Yep.
What I started to do was, I drove around with these wrestlers. I think my business card, it said something like, I'm a pro wrestling manager. They've got a trunk full of hot peppers or something like that. So I would sell this giardiniera at the wrestling shows. It's a mix of serrano peppers. It has onions, garlic, and celery. The thing is that they take the bottom round of beef and you slow roast it. Now, look, if you were an immigrant in the 1930s and you were going to have a wedding, let's say, you didn't have a lot of money, so they took this slice of meat that nobody wanted, and they slow cooked it, and they sliced it thin. And they put it on a nice Italian loaf, and they dumped giardiniera on it, and it was always a big hit. Chicago's famous for it. I do a wood-fired one that will blow your doors off. Whatever.
Ronnie, let me ask you something. I mean, you're doing all this stuff, and you're pouring a great beer, as I can see. When did you open Cigars and Stripes, and was it the same as it is now, or have you kind of evolved and changed over time with that business model?
Well, listen, 13 horrible, rotten, miserable years ago, I don't know what I did. I decided to open a cigar store. I'll be real. Do you want the full story, Gene, or do you want me to just jump in? Because you got to stop me. I get a little wound up. I'll tell you the story.
Well, remember, we're on a time segment, so you give me the good stuff.
I'll give you the good stuff. We used to repo cars. And then the object of when we repossessed cars, I had a store. I had a cigar a shop. And my thing was I used to hand pinstripe, race cars and motorcycles. And in the off season, we'd repo cars. The object of repossessing cars.
Are there people making out behind you, Ronnie? What is going on over there? Whoa. Get a hold of your show there, pal.
How you doing, sweetie? There you go. There's a regular there.
Go ahead.
What do you want me to do? Long story short, we used to repossess cars, and the object was to go in there and rifle through. I was an expert at taking the change out of the ashtrays. So we took all this change out of these ashtrays, and then we put it in this giant 55-gallon. Long story short, we bought cigars with it. And then all my friends would come over and smoke my cigars and said, listen, I'm going to open a cigar store. That's what I said. That was the bottom line. So you guys are stealing my cigars. I opened a cigar store. I had a couple Czechoslovakian wrestlers that were killers. My grandfather was in the business. Long story short, called up Jerry Lawler on the phone, drove down there. He said, look, come out and wrestle with my guys. And I went on the wrestling circuit. That's really what it is, Gene. And that was it. So I opened a cigar store. Then this bar came for sale. And I'll tell you what, one day, this guy walks in. He's a 350-pound man. I want you to listen to me. I'm not kidding with you. And he looks at me. I'm about 2 years into this business. And he says, Ronnie, give me a Bud Light. And I told him, I said, listen, I would rather die than serve you a Bud Light again. I'm not going to do this day in and day out. I'm not going to sell you a Bud Light. I've been pumping English ales down your faces for years, and nobody's listening to me. I'm done. You know what? In fact, I'm not paying my mortgage no more. I'm buying my smoker because the only time I felt like I was alive when I was cooking for those drunken, drugged up wrestlers. So there you go. I got a chicken wing that'll blow your doors off. It's smoked. Any meat you have should be smoked, with the exception of a steak. And your steak guy that was on is unbelievable. The guy from, where was he from? Fuck. He knows his shit.
Yes, indeed. He does know his shit. There you have it from October 15, 2013. Ronnie Lotz and Teddy Reeder. If you want to hear the complete episode, head to the bbqcentralshow.com. There is a link in the show notes to take you right to this episode. While you're there, make sure you subscribe to the Barbecue Central Show via podcast. Never miss an episode of the Barbecue Central Show or this show again. So until next time on the best moments of the Barbecue Central Show in 10 minutes or less, I'm your host, Jon Solberg. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to talking to you again soon.